The morning sun peeked through the thin curtains of the small apartment as Lucia wiped her hands on a dishcloth. She had just finished packing lunch for her son Miguel when she noticed the mail that she'd tossed on the table earlier. Bills, as usual. But something else caught her eye, a cream-colored envelope with elegant handwriting. "Miguel, hurry up or you'll be late for school," she called, picking up the envelope with curious fingers. Miguel raced into the kitchen, his backpack half-zipped. At 9 years old, he was all energy and bright eyes, his dark hair sticking up in the back despite Lucia's attempts to tame it with a wet comb earlier. "What's that?" he asked, reaching for his lunch bag. "I don't know," Lucia said, carefully opening the envelope. Inside was a card printed on thick paper that felt expensive to the touch. Her eyes widened as she read, "The Annual Music Foundation Charity Gala at the Grand Hotel downtown. This Friday evening. It's an invitation," she said, confused. They didn't get invitations to fancy events. Ever. Miguel stuffed his lunch into his backpack. "Can we have pizza tonight?" Lucia barely heard him. There was a handwritten note at the bottom of the invitation. "Ms. Lopez, your son's talent deserves to be nurtured. Please join us as my guest. Isabel Navarro, music director." "Miguel," she said slowly, "do you know Ms. Navarro?" He looked up, suddenly interested. "The lady who listened to me play at the community center? With the gray hair and a bun?" Lucia nodded, memories clicking into place. 3 weeks ago, she'd picked Miguel up late from the community center, after her shift at the diner ran long. She'd found him playing on the old keyboard they had there, with an older woman listening intently nearby. The woman had asked a few questions about how long Miguel had been playing, but Lucia had been too tired and rushed to think much of it. "We've been invited to a fancy music party," she told him, still trying to process it herself. Miguel's eyes grew wide. "Really? Like with real musicians?" "Yes, it says Anton Velasquez will be performing." She watched as her son's mouth dropped open. The Anton Velasquez. "Mom, he's only the best pianist in the whole world." Miguel bounced on his toes, suddenly electrified. Lucia checked the time on the microwave clock and gasped. "We'll talk about this later." "You need to run or you'll miss the bus." She quickly kissed his forehead and ushered him out the door, the invitation still in her hand. As soon as he was gone, she sank into a kitchen chair, a charity gala. At the Grand Hotel, the kind of event where people wore clothes that cost more than her monthly rent. The kind where wealthy folks sipped champagne and wrote checks with lots of zeros. She had exactly 45 minutes before she needed to leave for her morning shift at the coffee shop. Her second job at the hospital cafeteria wouldn't start until 4 in the afternoon. She stared at the invitation again. Miguel had been drawn to music since he was tiny. He'd tap rhythms on everything, pots, tables, his own knees. When he was 7, a neighbor moving out of their building had given him an old keyboard missing 5 keys. Miguel had treated it like treasure. He taught himself to play from YouTube videos and free apps on the ancient tablet Lucia's brother had passed down to them. He'd play the same songs over and over until they sounded right. When the community center got a donated keyboard last year, Miguel would spend hours there after school while Lucia worked. She ran her fingers over the embossed letters of the invitation. They couldn't afford music lessons. Not with rent, food, Miguel's growing feet needing new shoes every few months, and the medical bills still lingering from when he'd broken his arm last winter. But the invitation said guest. That meant free, right? Lucia went to the small closet in her bedroom and pushed hangers aside one by one. What would she even wear? Her best outfit was a navy blue dress she wore for job interviews and parent-teacher conferences. Would that be good enough for the Grand Hotel? The phone rang, startling her. It was her sister Rosa. "You sound stressed," Rosa said after Lucia's hurried hello. "I got an invitation to a fancy charity event. For Miguel. Something about music." "The kid's got talent," Rosa said. "Remember Christmas? He played that whole song after hearing it once. But I can't take him to the Grand Hotel. We don't belong there." Rosa was quiet for a moment. "Didn't Abuela always say opportunities come when you least expect them? Maybe this is one." Lucia looked at the clock. She needed to get ready for work. "Will you at least think about it?" Rosa asked. "I'll think about it," Lucia promised. Throughout her shift at the coffee shop, Lucia's mind kept returning to the invitation as she steamed milk and called out orders. The rich smell of coffee beans couldn't mask her worry. What if she embarrassed Miguel? What if people stared at them knowing they didn't belong? But then she remembered the way Miguel's face lit up at the mention of Anton Velasquez, her son who rarely asked for anything, who understood when she had to say no to toys and trips and new clothes. During her lunch break, she called the number on the invitation. A friendly voice answered, confirming that yes, they were expected at the gala, and yes, it was all taken care of. When Lucia hesitantly asked about the dress code, the woman assured her that dressy but comfortable would be fine. By the time Lucia picked Miguel up from the after-school program that evening, she had made up her mind. "We're going," she told him as they walked home, his small hand in hers. Miguel stopped walking and looked up at her. "For real? To hear Anton Velasquez?" The pure joy on his face made all her doubts seem smaller. For real. The next few days flew by in a blur of excitement and preparation. Rosa lent Lucia a sparkly hairpin and a small beaded purse. Her neighbor from across the hall, a seamstress, hemmed the navy dress to make it look more current. Miguel polished his only dress shoes until they gleamed. On Friday evening, as they stood at the bus stop in their best clothes, Miguel couldn't stand still. "Do you think he'll play Chopin? Or maybe Beethoven? I've been practicing the first part of Moonlight Sonata, but it's hard without all the keys on my keyboard." Lucia smiled, adjusting her hairpin. "I don't know, honey, but we're about to find out." The bus ride downtown took 40 minutes. With each passing block, the buildings grew taller, the streets cleaner, the people more expensively dressed. Miguel pressed his face against the window when the Grand Hotel came into view, all golden lights and towering columns. "It looks like a castle," he whispered. As they approached the entrance, Lucia's steps slowed. Luxury cars were pulling up, valets opening doors for men in tuxedos and women draped in jewels. For a moment, she considered turning around. Then Miguel squeezed her hand. "Mom, are you okay?" She looked down at her son's hopeful face and straightened her shoulders. "I'm fine. Let's go in." The hotel lobby was a sea of marble and crystal. Lucia clutched her invitation like a lifeline as they followed signs to the ballroom. A woman with a tablet stood at the entrance checking names. "Lucia and Miguel Lopez," Lucia said quietly, half expecting to be turned away. The woman smiled warmly. "Yes, Ms. Navarro's special guests. Please come in." The reception has just begun. They stepped into a ballroom that took Miguel's breath away. A massive crystal chandelier hung from a ceiling painted with clouds and angels. Round tables covered in white cloth surrounded a wooden dance floor. At the far end stood a magnificent grand piano, its black surface gleaming under the lights. "Mom," Miguel whispered, his eyes fixed on the piano. "It's so beautiful." A tall woman with silver hair approached them, her face breaking into a smile. "Ms. Lopez, Miguel. I'm so glad you could come. I'm Isabel Navarro." Miguel straightened up, suddenly shy. "Thank you for inviting us, ma'am." "I heard you playing Debussy at the community center," Ms. Navarro said. "Quite impressive for someone who's never had formal lessons." Lucia felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. How much further could Miguel go if she could afford to give him proper training? "The foundation hosts this gala every year to raise money for music education," Ms. Navarro explained. "Tonight we're hoping to fund scholarships for children who wouldn't otherwise have access to music instruction." Lucia nodded, understanding now why they'd been invited. They were the kind of people the charity aimed to help. "Anton Velasquez will perform after dinner," Ms. Navarro continued, "and rumor has it that Robert Yang might attend." Seeing Lucia's blank look, she added, "The tech billionaire. He's become quite the patron of the arts." As Ms. Navarro led them to their table, Miguel walked as if in a dream, his eyes darting between the piano on stage and the glamorous people filling the room. Lucia followed, feeling out of place but determined to give her son this night of wonder. Little did she know that by the end of the evening, everything would change. Lucia and Miguel settled at their table, arranged with gleaming silverware and crystal glasses that caught the light from the chandeliers. Miguel sat up straight in his chair, his eyes constantly drifting toward the grand piano on stage. 3 elderly women in colorful dresses joined their table, introducing themselves as longtime supporters of the Music Foundation. "And how are you connected to the foundation, dear?" one woman asked Lucia, adjusting her pearl necklace. Before Lucia could fumble for an answer, Ms. Navarro appeared at her shoulder. "Mrs. Chen, this is the young pianist I was telling you about," she said, placing a gentle hand on Miguel's shoulder. "Completely self-taught with remarkable natural talent. The women's expression shifted from polite curiosity to genuine interest. The one with the pearls leaned forward. Is that so? And what composers do you enjoy playing, young man? Miguel glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. I like Chopin best, he said, but the fast parts are hard without all the keys on my keyboard. Without all the keys? Another woman asked, frowning. Miguel explained about his second-hand keyboard with the missing keys, how he worked around the gaps by imagining the missing notes. The women exchanged glances as he spoke. Remarkable, Mrs. Chen murmured. She turned to Lucia. Your son has a gift. Servers began bringing out the first course, saving Lucia from having to respond. As delicate plates of food she couldn't name were placed before them, she leaned close to Miguel. Small bites, she whispered. And if you don't like something, just leave it. Don't make faces. Miguel nodded seriously, treating the meal like a mission. Lucia watched as he carefully mimicked the older women, using the correct fork, placing his napkin in his lap. She felt a swell of pride at his composure. As they ate, Lucia gradually relaxed. The elderly women were kind, drawing Miguel into conversation about music and school. Nobody seemed to notice or care that her dress wasn't designer, or that she wasn't familiar with the names they casually dropped in conversation. After the main course, a man in a tuxedo stepped onto the stage and tapped a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual Music Foundation Charity Gala, he announced. Tonight, we celebrate the power of music to transform lives and open doors for children who might otherwise never discover their talents. The crowd applauded politely. Before our featured performance, I'd like to invite our director, Isabel Navarro, to share a few words about this year's scholarship initiatives. Ms. Navarro took the stage, elegant in a simple black dress. She spoke passionately about bringing music education to underprivileged communities, about finding hidden talents in unexpected places. As she spoke, her eyes found Miguel in the crowd, and she smiled. Every child deserves the chance to explore their potential, she said. Tonight, your generosity will make that possible for dozens of young musicians who, like the remarkable young man I met recently at a community center, have extraordinary gifts waiting to be developed. Miguel straightened in his seat, realizing she was talking about him. Lucia squeezed his hand under the table. Following Ms. Navarro's speech, a video played on large screens, showing children from last year's scholarship program performing at their year-end recital. Miguel watched, transfixed, imagining himself among them. That could be you next year, Lucia whispered. When the video ended, the man in the tuxedo returned to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now take a short intermission before our special performance by the world-renowned Anton Velasquez. Please enjoy refreshments in the foyer, and remember that donation stations are set up throughout the venue. People began to rise from their tables. Mrs. Chen and her friends excused themselves, mentioning they wanted to speak with board members about increasing their annual contribution. Can we go look at the piano? Miguel asked once they were alone. Lucia hesitated. The stage seemed off limits, but most people were heading toward the foyer, leaving the ballroom half empty. Just to look, she agreed. We can't touch it. They approached the stage slowly. The grand piano was even more magnificent up close. Polished black with gold accents, its lid raised to reveal the complex inner workings of strings and hammers. Miguel stood at the edge of the stage, his eyes wide with wonder. It's a Steinway, he whispered, like the ones in the videos. A hotel staff member was adjusting a microphone near the piano, preparing for the upcoming performance. He noticed them and smiled. Beautiful instrument, isn't it? Miguel nodded, speechless. This is a Model D concert grand, the man continued, seeing Miguel's interest. Worth more than most cars. It sounds different from other pianos, Miguel said. Fuller somehow. The man raised an eyebrow, impressed by the observation. You play? He does, Lucia answered, though he's never had the chance to play on anything like this. The staff member seemed to consider something, then checked his watch. Well, we've got about 20 minutes before people return. If you want to just touch the keys. No playing, mind you. I could look the other way for a minute. Miguel's face lit up like a sunrise. He looked at his mother, hope and question in his eyes. Lucia knew she should say no. This wasn't their piano. They were guests, outsiders in this world of wealth and privilege. But the longing in her son's eyes made her heart ache. Thank you, she said to the staff member. Just for a minute. The man nodded and walked toward the back of the stage, giving them privacy while still keeping an eye on the valuable instrument. Lucia helped Miguel up the 3 steps to the stage. He approached the piano with reverence as if visiting a holy place. When he reached the bench, he stopped, suddenly unsure. "Go ahead," Lucia encouraged softly. "Just touch it like the man said." Miguel extended his hand slowly and pressed a single key. The note rang out, pure and perfect. His face transformed with wonder at the sound. He pressed another key, then another, not playing a song, just feeling the action of the keys, listening to each pristine note fade into silence. "It's perfect," he whispered. From across the ballroom, a deep voice called out, "Excuse me. The stage is off limits during intermission." Lucia turned to see a security guard striding toward them, his face stern. The staff member who had given them permission was nowhere to be seen. "I'm sorry," Lucia said quickly. "I'll have to ask you to return to your table," the guard interrupted. Miguel stepped back from the piano, his moment of joy cut short. As they moved to leave the stage, a small group of people entered the ballroom from a side door. Among them was a tall man in an impeccable suit, his presence commanding attention even from across the room. Mrs. Chen, returning early from the foyer, gasped softly. "That's Robert Yang," she whispered to her friends. "He actually came." The group with Yang moved toward a reserved table near the front. As they passed near the stage, Yang glanced up, his eyes briefly meeting Miguel's. Back at their table, Miguel couldn't stop looking toward the piano. "I only got to touch it," he said quietly. "I wish I could have played just one song." Lucia watched as the ballroom gradually filled again. The security guard had taken up position near the stage, making it clear there would be no second opportunity. "Anton Velasquez will play soon," she reminded him. "Won't that be wonderful to hear?" Miguel nodded, but his excitement from earlier had dimmed. Lucia's heart sank. She had wanted this night to be perfect for him. A glimpse into what might be possible if his talent was recognized and supported. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the second half of the program was about to begin. The man in the tuxedo returned to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to introduce our special guest performer for this evening. Please welcome the internationally acclaimed pianist Anton Velasquez." Applause filled the ballroom as a slim man with silver-streaked hair walked onto the stage and bowed gracefully. Miguel sat forward in his chair, his disappointment forgotten as his musical hero approached the piano. Velasquez settled at the bench, adjusted it slightly, and placed his hands on the keys. After a moment of perfect stillness, he began to play. The music poured forth like water flowing through the room, rising and falling with emotion. Miguel was transfixed, his eyes never leaving the pianist's hands as they danced across the keys. Lucia, watching her son more than the performer, saw in his face a hunger and longing that made her throat tight with emotion. This was what Miguel dreamed of. This was the world he belonged in, though circumstances had placed it out of reach. Velasquez played for nearly an hour, pieces by Chopin, Liszt, and Debussy. When the final note of the last piece faded away, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Miguel clapped until his hands hurt, his face glowing with inspiration. As people began to mingle again after the performance, Ms. Navarro approached their table. "What did you think?" she asked Miguel. "It was the best thing I've ever heard," he replied honestly. "The way he played Chopin's Nocturne. I've been trying to learn that one. Perhaps you'll play it on that piano yourself someday," Ms. Navarro said with a smile. After she moved on to greet other guests, Miguel turned to his mother. "Do you think she meant it? That I could play on a piano like that someday?" Lucia looked into her son's hopeful face and made a decision. If there was any way to make it happen, she would find it. "Whatever it took, yes," she said. "I think you will." Little did she know that the opportunity would come sooner than either of them could have imagined. The evening progressed with speeches and more fundraising appeals. Wealthy patrons raised their hands, pledging thousands of dollars with casual ease that made Lucia's head spin. A year of her combined salaries wouldn't match what some of these people gave without a second thought. "And now," the host announced, "we invite you all to enjoy dessert and coffee in the garden terrace. The string quartet will provide entertainment, and our donation stations will remain open throughout." People began to rise from their tables, the gentle murmur of conversation filling the room. Lucia checked her watch, nearly 10 o'clock. Miguel tried to hide a yawn behind his hand. "Should we head home?" she asked gently. It's getting late. Miguel shook his head firmly. Not yet, please. Lucia understood. Despite his tiredness, leaving meant returning to their ordinary life, where grand pianos and world-famous musicians didn't exist. She nodded and they joined the stream of people moving toward the garden terrace. The night air was pleasantly cool, with twinkling lights strung through the trees and soft music from the quartet, creating a dreamlike atmosphere. Waiters circulated with trays of tiny desserts and coffee in delicate cups. Miguel took a small chocolate cake that he declared was the best thing I've ever tasted. They found a quiet bench near a fountain away from the crowd. Miguel watched the water splashing, his expression thoughtful. Mom, he said suddenly, do you think I could ever play like Mr. Velasquez? The question caught Lucia off guard. She looked at her son, his serious eyes, his hands that always seemed to be tapping out rhythms even when there was no keyboard in sight. I think, she said carefully, that you have a special gift. And if you had the right opportunities, she trailed off, not wanting to make promises she couldn't keep. Miguel nodded as if she'd confirmed something he'd already decided. I'm going to practice more. Every day. Even the parts I find hard. Lucia wrapped her arm around his shoulders, her throat tight with emotion. His determination made her both proud and sad. Proud of his spirit, sad that she couldn't give him what he needed to truly develop his talent. After a while, Miguel's energy began to flag. The excitement of the evening combined with the late hour was catching up with him. His eyelids drooped as he leaned against Lucia's side. I think it's time to go, mijo, she said softly. He didn't argue this time. Nodding sleepily, they made their way back through the garden toward the ballroom, intending to thank Ms. Navarro before leaving. The ballroom was nearly empty now. Most guests were still enjoying the garden party, and staff had begun clearing some of the tables. Ms. Navarro was nowhere to be seen. Maybe she's in the foyer, Lucia suggested. As they walked toward the main doors, Miguel stopped suddenly, his eyes fixed on the stage. The grand piano still stood there, its lid closed now, the spotlight turned off. Mom, he whispered, can I just say goodbye to it? Lucia hesitated, remembering the security guard from earlier. But the stage was unattended now, and the few people left in the ballroom were busy with their own conversations, their backs to the stage. Just for a minute, she agreed, but we can't go on stage this time. They approached until they stood at the foot of the stage, looking up at the magnificent instrument. Miguel's face held such longing that Lucia felt her heart crack a little. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, he said, even better than in the videos. A hotel staff member, a different one from earlier, walked briskly across the far side of the ballroom. He glanced at them but continued on his way, apparently unconcerned with their presence near the stage. In that moment, something shifted in Lucia. All evening she'd watched her son contain his excitement, behave perfectly, accept the limitations of their situation with a grace beyond his years. She'd seen his face as he listened to Anton Velasquez play, the hunger, the inspiration, the pure love of music. Miguel deserved more than just looking at a piano from a distance. She made a quick decision. Come on, she said, taking his hand. Where are we going? You'll see. She led him to the small set of stairs at the side of the stage. After a quick glance around to confirm no one was watching, she whispered, Go up. Miguel's eyes widened. Really? Quickly, she urged. Just for a minute. He scrambled up the stairs and Lucia followed right behind. They crossed the stage quickly until they stood before the piano. Miguel's hand hovered over the closed lid, not quite touching it. Can I open it? He whispered. Lucia nodded, her heart pounding. She was breaking rules, possibly risking embarrassment or worse, but the joy spreading across her son's face made it worth it. Miguel carefully lifted the lid, revealing the pristine white and black keys. He let out a soft sigh of wonder. Go ahead, Lucia said. Play something. But quietly. Miguel hesitated. I'm not good enough for a piano like this. This piano has been waiting for you all night, Lucia said. It wants to hear what you can do. He smiled at that, then carefully climbed onto the bench. It was too high for him and his feet dangled above the pedals. Lucia grabbed a small footstool that had been left near the piano and positioned it under his feet. Miguel placed his fingers on the keys, closed his eyes for a moment, then began to play. The piece started softly, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the same one Velázquez had played earlier. The notes flowed from Miguel's fingers with a tenderness that seemed impossible from a 9-year-old. Where Velázquez's interpretation had been polished and perfect, Miguel's was raw and heartfelt. He made small mistakes here and there, but the emotion in his playing was undeniable. Lucia stood transfixed, watching her son lose himself in the music. She'd heard him play before, of course, but never on an instrument worthy of his talent. The difference was stunning. Absorbed in the moment, neither of them noticed the first few people turning to look. Neither saw the whispers and pointed fingers. Miguel continued playing, moving from the Nocturne into the beginning of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, his small hands stretching to reach the intervals. Only, when Lucia sensed movement in her peripheral vision, did she look up to see a small crowd forming at the edge of the ballroom. Horror washed over her as she realized what was happening. "Miguel," she whispered urgently, "we need to stop now." But Miguel was too immersed in the music to hear her. His eyes were closed, his body swaying slightly with the melody. A security guard appeared at the bottom of the stage steps, his face stern as he started to climb. Behind him, Lucia could see Ms. Navarro pushing through the gathering crowd, her expression unreadable. "Miguel, please," Lucia said, touching his shoulder. He opened his eyes, blinking as if waking from a dream. The music stopped abruptly as he registered the situation. "I'm sorry," he said, immediately sliding off the bench. "I didn't mean to." "It's my fault," Lucia said, stepping forward to face the approaching security guard. "I told him he could play. Please don't blame my son." The guard reached the top of the stairs, his walkie-talkie raised. "Ma'am, this area is restricted. I'm going to have to ask you both to come with me." Shame burned through Lucia. In her desire to give Miguel a special moment, she'd ruined everything. They would be escorted out, possibly banned from future events. Miguel's chance at a scholarship might vanish because of her impulsiveness. "Please," she began. "We didn't mean any harm." "What is happening here?" The deep voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd. People parted as Robert Yang stepped forward, his expression curious rather than angry. The security guard straightened immediately. "Sir, these individuals accessed the stage without permission." I heard music," Yang interrupted, his eyes fixed on Miguel. "Chopin, wasn't it? And then Beethoven." Miguel nodded, too nervous to speak. "You play remarkably well for someone so young," Yang continued. "How old are you?" "9, sir. And who is your teacher?" Miguel glanced at his mother, then back to Yang. "I don't have one. I learn from videos and apps." A whisper ran through the crowd. Yang's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of his surprise. Ms. Navarro stepped forward. "Mr. Yang, this is Miguel Lopez, the young man I mentioned during my speech. The one from the community center." Understanding dawned on Yang's face. He turned to the security guard. "Thank you for your diligence, but I believe we can handle this situation." The guard hesitated, then nodded and stepped back. Yang turned to Lucia. "You are his mother?" "Yes," she said, lifting her chin despite her embarrassment. "And I take full responsibility for this. Miguel didn't do anything wrong." Yang studied her for a moment, then looked back at Miguel. "Would you play something else for us? Perhaps the Chopin piece again, from the beginning?" Miguel looked at his mother, seeking permission. Lucia was bewildered by the turn of events, but nodded encouragingly. What more did they have to lose? Miguel returned to the bench and took a deep breath. With the entire room watching, he began to play the Nocturne again. This time, knowing he had an audience, his initial notes were hesitant. But soon the music took over, and he forgot everything except the connection between his fingers and the keys. The crowd grew larger as people returned from the garden, drawn by the unexpected performance. They gathered in a semicircle around the stage, watching in amazement as the small boy played with a soul and sensitivity that belied his age and lack of formal training. When the final notes faded away, there was a moment of complete silence. Then, starting from the back of the room and rolling forward, applause filled the ballroom. Miguel looked up, startled by the response. He slid off the bench and stood awkwardly next to his mother, unsure what to do next. Robert Yang climbed the steps to the stage, joining them. He looked at Miguel, then at Lucia, his expression thoughtful. "I believe," he said, his voice carrying across the now quiet room, "that we have just witnessed something extraordinary." And Lucia, standing beside her son on the grand stage, knew with absolute certainty that their lives were about to change. The applause gradually faded as Robert Yang raised his hand. The crowd, which had grown to include nearly everyone from the garden terrace, fell silent. Lucia stood frozen, her arm around Miguel's shoulders, uncertain whether they were in trouble or not. Yang turned to face the audience, his tall figure commanding attention without effort. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the ballroom, "I believe we've just witnessed why we're all here tonight." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "This young man," Yang continued, gesturing to Miguel, "has shown us what raw talent looks like. Talent that might have gone undiscovered without the kind of support this foundation provides." Lucia felt Miguel straighten beside her, pride replacing his earlier nervousness. Yang turned to them. "May I ask how long you've been playing?" "Since I was 7, Miguel answered, his voice steady despite the dozens of eyes watching him. "And your training?" Miguel glanced at his mother before answering. "I watch videos online, and there's a keyboard at the community center where I practice sometimes." "A keyboard," Yang repeated, a slight emphasis on the word. He turned to the audience again. "Not a piano like this. A keyboard. Possibly with unweighted keys without proper touch sensitivity." The wealthy patrons looked at each other, understanding dawning on their faces. "And yet," Yang continued, "he plays Chopin with more feeling than many conservatory students I've heard." Ms. Navarro stepped onto the stage, joining them. "This is exactly the kind of talent our scholarship program aims to nurture," she said. "Children with extraordinary gifts but limited access to instruction and proper instruments." Yang nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Lucia. "May I speak with you and your son privately for a moment?" Lucia's heart raced. "Of course," she managed to say, though her mouth had gone dry. Yang led them to a quiet corner of the stage, partially hidden by a large floral arrangement. Ms. Navarro followed but kept a respectful distance. "I apologize for putting you on the spot," Yang said, his tone softer now that they were away from the crowd. "But what your son just did was remarkable." Lucia nodded. "Thank you, but I should apologize for letting him play without permission. I just wanted him to have a moment with a real piano." Yang waved away her concern. "The hotel can survive a child playing their piano," he said with a small smile. "What interests me is how he played it." He crouched down slightly to look Miguel in the eye. "Tell me, what do you love about playing?" Miguel considered the question seriously. "When I play," he said finally, "I can say things I don't have words for. And sometimes when I get a piece just right, it feels like flying." Yang's expression softened. He straightened and turned to Lucia. "Ms. Lopez," she supplied. "Lucia Lopez. Ms. Lopez, I'd like to help your son develop his talent." Lucia blinked, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry." "The Foundation's scholarship program is excellent," Yang continued, "but I'd like to do something more immediate. With your permission, I'd like to provide Miguel with a piano and arrange for private lessons with a top instructor." The world seemed to tilt under Lucia's feet. She grabbed the edge of a nearby table to steady herself. "That's very generous," she said carefully. "But we live in a small apartment. There's no space for a piano." "There are excellent digital pianos that take up much less room," Yang replied. "Professional quality with properly weighted keys and pedals. And perhaps we could find a practice space for a real piano elsewhere." Lucia's mind raced. This kind of opportunity was beyond anything she had dared to hope for, but it also seemed too good to be true. "Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us." Yang was quiet for a moment. "I grew up without much," he said finally. "My parents worked constantly, but there was never enough. When I showed interest in computers, a teacher took notice and found me a scholarship to a summer program. That opportunity changed the course of my life." He glanced at Miguel, who was listening intently. "Talent like your son's deserves nurturing regardless of circumstance." Ms. Navarro stepped forward. "Robert has been one of our most generous supporters for years," she said. "But he rarely gets involved on a personal level like this." Yang smiled slightly. "What can I say? I was moved." He turned to Miguel. "Would you like that? A piano of your own and lessons from a real teacher?" Miguel's eyes were wide. "Yes, sir. More than anything." "Good. Then it's settled." Yang pulled out his phone. "Give me your contact information, Ms. Lopez, and I'll have my assistant arrange everything tomorrow." Lucia hesitated only briefly before giving him her number. As Yang typed it into his phone, she couldn't help asking, "Why were you even here tonight? Ms. Navarro said you might come, but honestly, I almost didn't." Yang slipped his phone back into his pocket. "I have 5 charity events this week alone." But Isabel was persistent, and now I'm very glad I came. More guests had begun to approach them, curious about what was happening. Yang straightened his jacket, once again the composed businessman. "I should mingle," he said, "but we'll be in touch very soon, Ms. Lopez." As Yang moved away to speak with the other guests, Ms. Navarro stayed behind. "You've made quite an impression tonight," she said with a smile. "I still can't believe this is happening," Lucia admitted. "It feels like a dream." Miguel tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, is it real? Am I really getting a piano?" The hope in his voice made Lucia's eyes sting with tears. "It seems that way, mijo." Ms. Navarro checked her watch. "It's getting very late. Would you like me to arrange a car to take you home?" Lucia thought of the long bus ride that would otherwise await them. "That would be wonderful, thank you." As they gathered their few belongings and prepared to leave, people kept approaching to congratulate Miguel. Wealthy patrons who might have overlooked them earlier now wanted to shake the hand of the young pianist who had impressed Robert Yang. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman from their dinner table, pressed a business card into Lucia's hand. "My late husband was on the board of the symphony orchestra," she said. "Call me if you need anything at all. That boy of yours is special." By the time they slid into the back seat of the luxury car Ms. Navarro had arranged, both Lucia and Miguel were exhausted. As the driver navigated through the quiet night streets, Miguel leaned against his mother's side. "Did you see their faces when I played?" he asked sleepily. "I did," Lucia said, stroking his hair. "They were amazed." "Mr. Yang said I played with feeling," Miguel murmured, his eyes drooping. He was right. Miguel was quiet for so long that Lucia thought he had fallen asleep. Then he whispered, "Thank you for lifting me onto the stage, Mom." Tears filled Lucia's eyes. She had always tried to give Miguel everything she could, but it never seemed enough. Tonight, her small act of courage had opened a door neither of them had dreamed possible. "Always, mijo," she whispered back. "Always." The next morning dawned bright and clear. Lucia had barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the previous night. Had it really happened? Would Robert Yang, a billionaire who probably made more money in an hour than she did in a year, actually follow through on his offer? Miguel was up early, practicing on his old keyboard with renewed enthusiasm. The broken keys didn't seem to bother him as much now. "I'm just imagining what it'll sound like on a real piano," he explained when Lucia asked. She made breakfast, trying to temper both their expectations. "Mr. Yang is very busy," she reminded Miguel. "It might take some time before we hear from him." "I know," Miguel said, but his face showed he was already counting the minutes. Lucia had just finished washing the breakfast dishes when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Her heart leapt, but she forced herself to answer calmly. "Hello? Ms. Lopez? This is Diane Wong, Mr. Yang's executive assistant. I'm calling regarding the piano and music lessons he discussed with you last night." Lucia gripped the edge of the counter. "Yes? Mr. Yang has asked me to coordinate delivery of a digital piano to your home today if that's convenient. And he's arranged for Professor Thomas Wu from the conservatory to evaluate Miguel and begin lessons as early as this weekend." "Today?" Lucia repeated, stunned. "He's sending a piano today?" Miguel's head snapped up from his math homework, his eyes wide. "Yes, if that works for you," Diane continued. "The delivery company would need your address and a preferred time." Lucia gave her the information in a daze. "Excellent," Diane said. "Also, Professor Wu would like to meet with Miguel tomorrow afternoon. I can send a car to bring you both to his studio at the conservatory." "That would be fine," Lucia managed. "Please thank Mr. Yang for us. It's incredible." "Mr. Yang takes these commitments very seriously," Diane replied. "He believes strongly in supporting exceptional talent." There was a pause, then she added more warmly, "I was at the gala last night. Your son plays beautifully." After ending the call, Lucia turned to Miguel, who was practically bouncing in his seat. "Is it really coming today?" he asked, his voice cracking with excitement. Lucia nodded, still processing the news herself. "And tomorrow we're meeting a professor from the conservatory. He's going to be your teacher." Miguel leapt from his chair and threw his arms around her. "Thank you, Mom." "Thank you." Lucia hugged him tightly. "I didn't do anything, mijo. You lifted me to the piano," he said simply. Everything good started from there. As they embraced in their small kitchen, surrounded by their modest belongings, Lucia realized that sometimes the bravest acts weren't grand or dramatic. Sometimes courage was as simple as helping your child reach a piano, even when the world said it wasn't your place to do so. The digital piano arrived that afternoon. It wasn't just any keyboard. It was a high-end model with weighted keys that felt like a real piano, 3 pedals and a beautiful wooden stand. The delivery people set it up in the corner of their living room, where it immediately became the centerpiece of their small apartment. Miguel approached it reverently after they left, running his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. "Go ahead," Lucia encouraged. "It's yours." He sat on the bench and began to play. The rich sound filled their apartment, so different from the tinny tones of his old keyboard. Miguel played for hours, stopping only when Lucia insisted he eat dinner. "It's the best day of my life," he declared as he finally got ready for bed, exhausted but glowing with happiness. Lucia tucked him in and kissed his forehead. "Just wait until tomorrow. You'll meet your new teacher." The next day, as promised, a sleek black car arrived to take them to the conservatory. Miguel fidgeted nervously during the ride, suddenly worried about meeting Professor Wu. "What if he thinks I'm not good enough?" he whispered to his mother. "Then he would be wrong," Lucia replied firmly. "But he won't think that. He'll see what everyone at the gala saw, that you have a special gift." The conservatory was an imposing stone building with large windows and music flowing from various practice rooms. A receptionist led them to Professor Wu's studio, a spacious room dominated by 2 grand pianos. Professor Wu was a slender man with silver-rimmed glasses and kind eyes. He greeted them warmly, putting Miguel at ease almost immediately with his gentle manner. "Mr. Yang has told me about your performance," he said to Miguel. "I'm looking forward to hearing you play. But first, let's talk a bit about music. What composers do you enjoy?" Over the next hour, Professor Wu asked Miguel questions, listened to him play several pieces, and assessed his knowledge of music theory. While Miguel worked through scales and exercises, the professor took Lucia aside. "Your son has extraordinary natural talent," he said quietly. "He has developed remarkable technique on his own, though there are some fundamentals we'll need to work on." "So you'll take him as a student?" Lucia asked anxiously. Professor Wu smiled. "It would be my privilege. Mr. Yang has arranged for twice-weekly lessons for the next year with all materials and expenses covered." Tears sprang to Lucia's eyes. "I don't know how to thank him, or you. Simply bring Miguel to his lessons," the professor replied. "The rest will take care of itself." As they left the conservatory with a stack of new music books and a regular lesson schedule, Miguel could hardly contain his excitement. "Professor Wu said I could be ready for a student recital in just a few months." "That's wonderful, mijo. And he said I can practice in one of the conservatory's rooms whenever I want." On a real grand piano. Their lives transformed rapidly over the next weeks. Miguel's lessons with Professor Wu became the center of their schedule. Lucia adjusted her work hours to accommodate them, grateful that her boss at the coffee shop was willing to be flexible. Miguel practiced diligently every day on his digital piano at home and twice a week at the conservatory. His progress was remarkable. Professor Wu introduced him to music theory, proper technique, and new composers, expanding his already impressive repertoire. 3 weeks after the gala, Lucia received another call from Diane Wong. "Mr. Yang would like to invite you and Miguel to lunch this Saturday," she said. "He's interested in hearing about Miguel's progress." Lucia accepted, though she felt nervous about meeting the billionaire again. What would they talk about? What should she wear? The restaurant was upscale but not intimidating. Yang greeted them warmly, asking Miguel about his lessons and listening intently as the boy enthusiastically described what he was learning. "Professor Wu tells me you're advancing quickly," Yang said. "He believes you have the potential to go very far with the right support." Miguel beamed with pride. "Which brings me to the reason I wanted to meet today," Yang continued, turning to Lucia. "I've been thinking about how to create more sustainable opportunities for children like Miguel." He explained that he had been meeting with the Music Foundation board and other potential donors. "We're establishing a new program specifically focused on identifying and supporting gifted young musicians from underserved communities." Lucia listened, amazed at how her son's impromptu performance had sparked something much larger. The program will provide instruments, lessons, mentorship, and eventually pathways to higher education, Yang continued. We're calling it the Rising Stars Initiative. That's wonderful, Lucia said sincerely. We'd like Miguel to be our first official student, Yang said, which means continued support through high school and potentially beyond, if music remains his passion. Miguel's eyes widened. Really? Yang nodded. Really. And Ms. Lopez, we'd also like to offer you a position with the foundation, helping to coordinate the program. Lucia nearly choked on her water. Me? But I don't know anything about running a music program. You know everything about supporting a gifted child with limited resources, Yang replied. That perspective is invaluable. The position would include training, of course, and the salary would be significantly better than working 2 service jobs. Lucia was speechless. A career rather than just jobs. Work that would make a difference, and the chance to be more present for Miguel's journey. Can I think about it? She asked finally. Of course, Yang said. Take all the time you need. On the way home, Miguel couldn't stop talking about the Rising Stars program. Other kids will get the same chance I did, he said. And you'd be helping them, Mom. Lucia smiled, her mind still processing the offer. It's a big change, but a good one, right? Looking at her son's hopeful face, Lucia nodded. Yes, I think it is. 2 months after the gala, Miguel performed in his first student recital at the conservatory. He played Chopin's Nocturne, the same piece he had played on the grand piano that night. But now, with proper technique and greater understanding of the music, the recital hall was filled with proud parents and supportive teachers. But there were also some unexpected guests. Ms. Navarro, Mrs. Chen, and her friends from the gala, and sitting quietly in the back row, Robert Yang. After the recital, as people mingled and congratulated the young performers, Yang approached them. That was exceptional, he told Miguel. You've made remarkable progress. Thank you, sir, Miguel replied, more confident now in the presence of his benefactor. I practice every day. It shows. Yang turned to Lucia. Have you considered my offer? She nodded. I've decided to accept. I gave notice at both my jobs last week. Excellent, Yang said, looking pleased. The foundation will be lucky to have you. As they chatted, a reporter from the local newspaper approached, asking permission to take a photo of Miguel with his mentor. As Yang and Miguel posed together at the piano, the reporter asked how they had connected. It was at a charity gala, Yang explained. I heard this young man playing and knew immediately that he had a rare gift. The reporter turned to Lucia. And you're Miguel's mother? How did you feel when you heard him play at the gala? Lucia smiled, remembering the moment. I didn't just hear him, I helped make it happen. When no one was watching, I lifted him onto the stage. I just wanted him to have a moment with a beautiful piano. The reporter looked intrigued. You snuck him onto the stage. Sometimes a mother has to break a rule or two, Lucia said with a small laugh. I never imagined it would change our lives. The next day, the newspaper ran a story with the headline, She lifted her son to the piano. The billionaire's response stunned the room. It told the story of a mother's courageous act, a child's remarkable talent, and a wealthy man's life-changing response. The story quickly went viral, picked up by national news outlets and shared across social media. Suddenly, the Rising Stars Initiative was flooded with donations and inquiries from both potential students and volunteers wanting to help. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn evening, Lucia stood backstage at the grand opening of the Rising Stars Music Center. The renovated building, once an abandoned community theater, now housed practice rooms, teaching studios, a small recital hall, and office space for the rapidly growing program. 28 students from across the city were already enrolled, with more being evaluated each week. Miguel, dressed in his first suit, a gift from Mrs. Chen, was scheduled to perform the opening piece. As he waited for his cue, he reached for his mother's hand. I'm a little nervous, he admitted. You'll be wonderful, she assured him. Mom, he asked quietly, do you think if you hadn't lifted me to the piano that night, any of this would have happened? Lucia considered the question. Maybe. Your talent would have found a way to be heard eventually. But it might have taken longer. Yes, she agreed. It might have. The stage manager signaled that it was time. Miguel squeezed his mother's hand once more before walking onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. Lucia watched from the wings as her son settled at the grand piano. Not a borrowed one this time, but one that belonged to a center created in part because of him.